Coach, you talked after the loss last night about conditioning, wanting to get up and down a little more in practice. Is that something you're able to do the day after a game today? Or?
Yeah, it's definitely hard because we had guys that starters played roughly 28 minutes, and third quarter I ran that group the whole third pretty much. And now you're in the middle of a 3 and 5 in the preseason. So obviously not ideal timing with that, but it is what it is. I think we got to challenge ourselves and push ourselves, and we have 2 more games to try to do that. Game conditioning, because you can replicate it in practice, but unless you're just going to blow it out and put 12 minutes on the clock and bring some refs in, it's hard to, because there are also some things that we have to clean up and get better at, and that requires drill work and teaching things and getting the proper repetition. So it's a fine line, but we'll get there. I have no doubt about that. Today we watched film. Obviously, a lot of the things that we can clean up upon from last night. We had 14 blow-bys for 22 points. That's where your defense starts, is on the ball. And then we have guys helping, but we're over-helping. So now you got 2 or 3 guys going into the paint. Now that 3-point line is wide open. So just some things and muscle memory and repetition that we can help our guys with.
Does the Obby Trip factor into any of that at all? In the weird week off between games,
Yeah.
Snippy,
Yeah, I still don't know what that means, but as Muhammad Ali said, man, if it's good, I'm it. I would say one of our coaches told me this morning that, I don't know if this is true, maybe it's an old wives' tale, but it takes a day for each hour when you come back from a long trip like that. So 10-hour time change, and we're not even back to that yet. I think it's only been a week since we've been home. So I'm sure there's some carryover from that. Yeah. But my retort, because I'm not one to give into excuses, is I look at the Boston-Toronto score at halftime last night, and I said, well, it's not affecting Boston. They had 71 points at halftime, and Toronto had like 22. So it affects everybody differently, but I'm sure there's some hangover from that trip, and that's why it's great that we have tomorrow night, and we have the game in Minnesota, and then a week more after that to conclude our preseason and get ready for our season opener.
Where do you think Jamal is, conditioning-wise, health-wise, etc.?
Well, after last night, going into the game, he's been great. And that was the weird thing about last night, is that he told me this morning that he'd been feeling great, and all of a sudden last night during his pregame warm-ups, it just was starting to feel a little funny, if you will. And a lot of times he's able to just kind of get going and play through it, and it'll loosen up.
You mean the knee, right?
Yes, yeah. And last night that wasn't the case. So, but up until that point, Ramon, he's been healthy, ready to go. Yeah. And I asked him this morning. I said, "Where do you think your conditioning is?" And he feels it's in a good place. For years we did a conditioning test, the old beep test, and Jamal would win it every year. Huh. And the funny thing about it was, I don't know if Jamal was ever the best conditioned player when he won it, but Jamal's mental and his ability to endure the pain is just second to none. And that's why he was able to fight through. And a lot of other guys, they got to a certain beep and they were like, man, beep this, I'm done. So, Jamal is pretty special in that regard.
Can you describe the beep test?
Well, it's a series of beeps, obviously, as the name suggests.
That, yeah.
And I forget what the distance is between the cones.
Okay.
And the beeps start out at a fairly slow pace. Okay. And so first beep, you have to get to that second cone before the beep comes on.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And so I would say it's probably from the baseline to, I wouldn't say 3/4 court, but it's a pretty good distance. And then the beeps get quicker and quicker. Okay. And we would say for the big guys, you have to get to at least 14. The wings have to get to maybe 16, and the guards have to get to 18. And Jamal, and some guys would get their required number and say, I'm good. But Jamal was never going to settle on getting just 18. He was I'm going to run everybody until you stop before I stop. And it was always impressive to watch him do so.
You've always been like his biggest fan. I remember asking you before, like when he would have a shooting struggles or whatever, it was like, even when he was hurt, like you would pump him up and pump his confidence. Like, why is that? Is it because of that stuff like that, or is it?
Yeah, and just his journey, our journey together. I mean, that's the thing when I think about the fact that I'm in my 10th year here in Denver, which I never take lightly. And you're with Nicola for 10 years, you're with Jamal Murray for 9 years, and like Jamal and I will laugh. I said, man, he used to be Gary Harris's backup, and we had Emmanuel Mudiay and Jameer Nelson as our point guards, and reminisce about that, and he's like, man, that's crazy to think about. No disrespect to those guys, but his evolution as a player, as a young man. But no, you come to love these guys, and we're with each other so much. And that's what's incredible about Nikola. I mean, how great he is night in, night out, year in, year out. But I'm always going to have our players' backs and try to help them deal with whatever adversity from a health standpoint or on the court struggles that they may be having. Because as my father taught me, X's and O's are great, but it's more about relationships. And your players have to know that you care about them.
You mentioned Aaron Gordon in Abu Dhabi is not feeling 100%. Where is he stopping?
Yeah, I think he's in a good place. I give him credit. I think that the calf injury from game one, those kind of soft tissue injuries always kind of linger a little bit. But, I think he's a guy that came into camp in good shape. And he knows his body, he knows his rhythm, and is doing what he needs to do to kind of get to opening night. And the challenge of that for me is making sure each guys have their own, but I don't look at, I'm looking at collectively. We as a 5-man unit, we as an 18-man roster have to find a way to get our rhythm together. And we've had it in bursts. Andrew Monson sent me a text last night that really kind of picked my spirits up, because I was somewhat concerned after the game last night. Not because we're 0-3. Like, the record means nothing to me. It's more about the ability to stack plays and stack quarters and stack minutes together. And he said, listen, our first half offensive rating, defensive rating, net rating is really good. Our second half, that hasn't been the case. And I said, well, we played our starters the entirety of the third quarter, and we gave up 37 points. But overall, so I think Aaron, he's moving in the right direction, and we have 2 more opportunities to get he and everyone else ready for the OKC opener.
One more. Coach Monson frequently text you after games, random things like that, just like if it's a pick me up or whatever.
No, I wouldn't say often. But he's, he sent me a text this summer, like when the whole, conversation around our team is the 3-point line and how we have to diversify our offense, which I laughed at, because you're not at a top 5 offense every year. You don't win a championship just 15 months ago. But he talked about how shooting threes would be great, more threes. Like, no one's anti-shooting more threes. But our best offensive rating games last year were games where we scored 60 more in the paint. Our best 3-point shooting games last year didn't take our offensive rating through the roof. So just kind of keeping things in perspective. But Muntz has a really good feel. He knows who I am. He's very studious. He knows the team. And he's always offering great insights, not only into individual players, but also more from a team standpoint that allows me to kind of refocus at times. Yeah. Okay, Ryan, I'll give it to you.
All right, but
extra innings here.
Don't blow
appreciate
it.
My Mets got their ass kicked last night.
I just wanted to ask you how you feel the starting shooting guard competition is developing.
Yeah, I mean, it's Julian played great last night. Like, if you ask me, hey, what were the positives from the game last night? Even though it was a loss and there were a lot of things we could clean up. The turnovers improved, which is great, which helped our transition defense improve. We had great numbers on the offensive glass. But I think the 2 positives from a personnel standpoint, I thought Julian Strother continued to play well. He's playing very efficiently in terms of his field goal, his 3-point. He can't leave all those empty points on the free throw line. He should be a high 80% free throw shooter. So I thought that was a real positive. And then I thought Zeke Naji was a real positive last night. I really thought Zeke came into the game, knocked down shots, had a presence at the rim, had really good defensive discipline. So those were probably the 2 guys that I said, I really enjoyed watching them and how they played the game last night. With that being said, regarding your question, obviously it's never going to be just about who's playing better in a vacuum. It's always going to be about, yes, who's playing well, but also who complements that unit. And right now, to be honest, I think CB and Jamal and Michael and Aaron and Nikola, that's a group that really complements each other well. I think Russ, when we get Peyton Watson back, and that's been really hard for us not to have Peyton, but I think Russ, Julian, Peyton, Dario, and whoever else, I think that's a really good complementary group as well. But I will give Julian some more chances to get out there and start and play with that group. And then we have 2 more opportunities to kind of see opening night what we feel will be the best 5-man unit for us, for our group. But both those guys are doing their job, and they're going to make it a tough decision.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coach.